guys, so the weather is starting to change. Halloween is approaching and it just feels like autumn is here. So I thought it might be fun to do an autumn reading recommendations video. I sat down and sort of thought of books that made me think of the autumnal season, or fall as some of you call it. That included a few creepy books appropriate for Halloween, but also just some books that kind of had that cold, absorbing feeling that you wanted to read them when the weather was changing and the nights were getting darker, curled up in your bed, maybe with a cup of hot chocolate or something. They just seemed appropriate. So like I've mentioned, I've got some kind of creepier stories, I've got some historical fiction, I've got a little bit of fantasy with sort of paranormal elements, I've got some detective fiction and even a creepy children's book. So without further ado, let's get into the book recommendations. So in no particular order, the first book I'm going to mention is The Wonder by Emma Donoghue. This is a book that I first read in September, so sort of as autumn was approaching, and it feels like an autumnal book to me. It's a historical fiction novel set in 1859 in Ireland. And our protagonist is a woman who has gotten a job as a nurse to observe this young girl in a rural Irish village who supposedly hasn't eaten anything in months but is managing to stay alive. And some people think it's some sort of religious miracle, some people think it's a trick. And she's there along with a nun to keep this girl under constant surveillance and figure out what is going on. So there is a bit of a mystery element to it in that we don't know from the out what is happening with this girl, and it's one of those books that has lots of little twists and turns. There is one revelation after the other and it keeps you constantly engaged. It was one of those books that for me was just perfectly paced. As soon as I thought, oh, it's all going to be figured out and I'm going to be done with it, it was like there was something new added to it for me to be curious about. And I really enjoyed our main character. She has some mysteries of her own that you don't really know about, so you're learning about her. And it's just such an intriguing novel, and I just think Emma Donoghue is a wonderful writer, and I think this book is perfect for the autumn season. It's incredibly atmospheric and it will completely absorb you and you'll speed through it. A more recent release I thought I would mention is Melmoth by Sarah Perry. So this book is inspired by the legends of a travelling spirit that haunts the guilty called Melmoth, and the author Sarah Perry was inspired by these sort of legends to create her own story, where our protagonist, who lives in the Czech Republic, has recently come in contact with some documents that reveal the mystery of Melmoth to her, and Melmoth suddenly becomes a part of her life, and she feels like Melmoth is there with her, reminding her of something she feels guilty about that she is punishing herself for, and you don't know what it is. So we're both learning about her background but also reading the documents that tell of others who have come in contact with Melmoth, and we're not sure if Melmoth is real or in her imagination. Is it just a personification of her guilt, or is there something ghostly going on? But we read these documents that look back in time. Particularly one of the longest ones focuses during World War II, about a young boy who is experiencing World War II in Prague but is German, and it's about piecing all of these little mysteries together. It's unnerving and intriguing. What more could you want for Halloween or autumn? We then have The Red House Mystery by A.A. Milne. Yes, the A.A. Milne who wrote Winnie the Pooh. So A.A. Milne actually wrote one adult detective novel which isn't as popular as his Winnie the Pooh books, but is actually just as good in my opinion, and I love Winnie the Pooh. So The Red House Mystery is a sort of cosy detective novel. It definitely pokes fun a little bit at the traditions of the genre. It kind of makes reference to Sherlock Holmes and is quite self-aware in that sense, but at the same time has a really great mystery at its core. It was published and is set in the 1920s, and it's about our narrator and his friend, who's actually an amateur detective, when they are staying at this house and somebody dies in very mysterious circumstances. So his friend is sort of figuring out that mystery in a little bit of a Sherlock Holmes sense, in that he's like a little bit smarter than everybody else. But like I mentioned, there are some sort of tongue-in-cheek nods to books like Sherlock Holmes, and I just think this is a fantastic novel. It's such a shame that A.A. Milne didn't get a chance to publish more detective fiction, because I think he was excellent at it, and this one is well worth a read. We then have White is for Witching by Helen Oyeyemi. This is a gorgeous, literary, creepy story, and it ticks so many boxes for me. I adored it, and I would actually really like to reread it. And this book is told from the perspective of a house. A very creepy house. house is the perfect creepy narrator to any unnerving story. But we follow this young woman who's the latest generation in a family where the women are all supposedly witches. She also has a condition whereby she eats food that isn't actually food, so things like cotton wool or chalk. She will be drawn to eat those things. So she's dealing with that issue. Her mother has passed away and she's living with her father and her brother and about to go off to university, so it's all of that sort of background, quite ordinary realistic stuff, life stuff, but in the background there is this house, and this house is obsessed with our young protagonist. But at the same time, we're not quite sure to what degree magic is real. Obviously we have this unnerving overtone of the house narrating everything, but is there actually magic? It's kind of unclear, or could things easily be explained by realistic circumstances? It's so beautifully written though. Helen Oyeyemi just writes the most gorgeous prose. You just like read sentences and think this is a piece of artwork, and at the same time it's an intriguing, absorbing story, which also includes a really well written queer relationship between two female characters, so lots of boxes ticked. Let's move to some YA though now. Let's mention a young adult book that is the first in a series that I started quite recently and just feels perfect for this time of year, and I'm definitely going to be picking up the sequel during autumn, and that is The Diviners by Libba Bray. The sequel that I plan on picking up is Lane of Dreams. And this book is set in 1920s New York and is multiple perspective, following a few different characters living in New York at this time, all of whom appear to have some sort of paranormal, supernatural, magical ability. So this character that we first meet is Evie, and she can read the past of people through objects that belong to them and sort of see where this object has been and what its owner has gone through. And she has been sent off to live with her uncle, who owns an occult museum in New York. In New York, she gradually comes in contact with these other young people living there, and their lives begin to intertwine, and at the same time there is a ritualistic serial killer killing people in New York, and she kind of gets dragged into solving that mystery. It is such an intricately woven story. There's so much happening. It is so well constructed. Libba Bray is one of my favourite young adult writers, if not one of my favourite writers, and I just again think this would be perfect for this time of year. We then have a children's book, but maybe one of the creepiest books on this list. Yes, I said it, and that is Coraline by Neil Gaiman. So this book is a story that follows Coraline, a young girl who has moved into a new home with her parents, and she's bored and a bit lonely, so she's exploring the building that they live in, meeting the people that live in the different flats, and she comes across this other world where live her other mother and her other father, and everything is seemingly exactly the same as her world, except her mother and father have buttons for eyes. I'll say no more. It's a wonderful, creepy, surreal, magical little story. Neil Gaiman has a wonderful imagination, and this book is just perfect for all ages. Not particularly creepy, but full of magic and witchcraft and autumnal vibes is the Sweep series by Kate Tiernan, which begins with Book of Shadows. This is a book I adored as a teenager and actually reread last year in 2017 and loved it just as much, and was so pleased that I loved it just as much. This story follows Morgan, a teenage girl growing up in America who discovers an aptitude for Wicca when another young person moves to her town, a young boy called Cal, and introduces her and her friends to Wicca as a religion, as he and his mother are practicing Wiccans, although as she finds out there is a little bit more than the ordinary side of this, and that there is real magic and she actually is a witch. And it's about her learning about Wicca, coming to terms with her craft, learning more about her background, kind of some secrets her family have been keeping from her, but all of the ordinary teenage stuff as well, including friendships, family, relationships, and it's such a wonderful combination of things. The books are very short, so they're now sold in bind-ups of 3, which I think is good actually, because you get a lot more that way, and it's such a fun, absorbing, magical series that I would highly recommend. We then have Glitter by John Burnside, which is a book that can't be easily categorised. I guess it's literary fiction, it's also a bit of a mystery, it's eerie and unnerving, and just a book that you kind of need to read for yourself to fully appreciate. And this book follows a young boy in a town that had a power plant that shut down, and that was where loads of people worked, but now they've been made redundant. But there's sort of rumours that this power plant has had an effect on the people that live in this town at the same time. He lives with his father and is a little bit of a loner and doesn't always have a great relationship with the other kids at school, and there's some kind of dark moments as the book unravels. But right at the beginning there is also a murder. The body of a child is found, and he is really convinced that he wants to find out what's going on. You would never guess what was going to happen in this book. It twists, it turns, it's surreal, it's odd, strange, but wonderful, beautifully written, if a little disturbing, and that's all I can say. It's just the adjectives, really. But last but certainly not least, I thought I would mention Hollow Pike by Juno Dawson. Back to witchcraft, it would seem, or at least hints of witchcraft. This isn't the one where you're not quite sure if there's magic, witchcraft or not. It is sort of lurking in the background. So this is a young adult novel following our protagonist who has recently moved to this new hometown and has made some friends at her school, and her new friends develop an interest in witchcraft. This book I've seen compared to The Craft, and although I think it's different and it very much its own story, I can see that perhaps if you enjoy the film The Craft then you might enjoy this book. It manages to combine sort of thriller, mystery, young adult drama of relationships and friendships and bullying, as well as a little bit of that paranormal eeriness that you don't know what's going on. All in all, an excellent debut novel. But those are all the books I wanted to recommend to you in this video. Last year I actually did a specifically Halloween related book recommendations video, although this one was a little bit more broad and not everything in it was creepy or Halloweeny, although I think quite a few of them were, but they were certainly covering a little bit more of a broad spectrum of genres. But if you'd like more kind of creepy Halloween book recommendations, I will link that video down below for you, and I would love, love, love to hear your autumnal reading recommendations. What genres do you gravitate towards in the autumn months, and what book would you recommend that I check out? I'd love to know, as well as any of your thoughts on any of these books. But until next time, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye!